ready to go. I'm going to stay mostly in one spot because I know what it's like to chase the speaker around. Come on, I got to wear the hat. It's DerbyCon, right? I want to thank everybody for coming out to DerbyCon. Is everyone having a good time? Awfully glad to hear it. Does everybody plan on coming out to DerbyCon too? Glad to hear that also. Well, originally I wasn't going to speak at DerbyCon, but then we had some spots to fill, and I was like, okay, I'm in. I want to talk about this because I've been messing around with this for a little bit. This talk is building a Svartkast. I hope I'm pronouncing that right because it's Swedish. With a pretty pink tongue twisters are not a good thing to put in your talk's title. Building a Svartkast with a pretty pink pogo plug. Cheap hardware to leave behind on someone else's network. Of course, I'm Adrian Crenshaw. I run irongeek.com. Has anybody been out to the website? Groovy. If not, come check it out. I need the traffic. I have an interest in InfoSec education. I don't know everything. I'm just a geek with time in my hands. I may get something wrong. If I do, come up and talk to me. I'd be interested in knowing what's what. I'm also an irregular on the ISD podcast. They podcast 5 times a week. I'm usually on Thursdays unless it's a conference coming up and I can't make it on Thursday. But I'm usually on at least once a week. And I'm also a researcher for the Tenacity Institute. Now, they didn't technically sponsor this particular talk. So if you dislike it, you can't blame them. Or if you don't like my subject matter, you can't blame them. But if you do like the subject matter, I'm sure you toss some money their way. They'll be glad to hire me to do some more research in this particular field. But they've been great to work with. They've been a sponsor for the conference, and because I'm wearing the shirt right now. So what exactly is this talk about, you might be wondering? Well, it's about little boxes you can leave behind. Little internal hosts you can put inside of a network. Because inside of a network is usually a lot softer. You know, people have equated it to a candy with a hard outer shell and a soft, gooey center. So if you can get a box inside the network, well, that's a lot of power. If you have a little social engineering skills or some physical penetration test ability, you can sneak in there and put a box inside of a network. Where this comes in is the thing that makes a Svartkast a little bit different than a common drop box. A lot of times you all sell the Pwn plug out there, right? Pony Express. That's an example of what some people have called drop boxes in the past. And the idea of a drop box is you just leave that on someone else's network and it remotes out to you. Because most people have weaker egress filtering than ingress filtering on firewall rules and general security measures. So that's a lot of times a good way to go. The problem with drop boxes is a lot of name collision. Now the difference between that and something like a Svartkast, which is Swedish for the word, or English translation would be black throw or kamikaze box. Kamikaze box is called that because you leave it behind someplace and you may not be able to recover it. But the core difference is you're also sometimes tunneling through a dark net. So let's say you're using something like the Pony Express. My understanding, I haven't looked at the Pony Express specifically, but you're connecting directly into it. So if someone's tracing it, they know who's coming in to remotely control that box. However, with this Svartkast concept, you're actually tunneling in through a darknet like Tor or I2P, which I'll go into a little bit more in a bit. I actually got the Svartkast term from the Telecomics guys, if you ever checked out their website. They do a lot with privacy. And the idea behind this is, let's say you're living in some country and you're a political dissident, you can leave these boxes behind and you can use them as relays for free speech. But that's the core idea of it. Basically, it's a Dropbox that's anonymized via Tor or I2P or the like. Alright. The original thing that made me interested in this is I had a bunch of these old JetDirect boxes, and I knew they had full IP stacks. You know, you could tunnel into them. They had web servers on them. I was like, wow, these things are actually fairly powerful. I wonder if I can make these into a host I can remote into, make them into little drop boxes. Well, I never was able to do that, and in the end, these things are not as hackable. They run VxWorks and instead of Linux, and not a lot of people were working with them. Not to mention, I had a bunch laying around, but most people didn't. And they're kind of expensive versus some of the hardware I'll be showing you here in a bit. So that never took off, but it kind of piqued my interest in like cheap hardware you could leave behind on someone else's network and remote into. There's several options you could possibly use for hardware to remote into on a network. An obvious one is an old laptop or an old PDA. If it's a PDA, some of the old iPacs you can actually put Linux on. Sharpzorus already has Linux on it. That's the kind of thing you could leave behind someone's network, and has a lot of options for remoting back in. And it's not that hard to find an old laptop. You do PC repair for people. Sometimes you'll just be given an old laptop. I got a bunch of stuff just sitting around my house that's too old to be useful for most purposes, but for Svartkast it'd be fine. There's the Zip-It, which you may have seen a talk I did at AutoZone a couple years ago where I use the Zip-It as a little pen testing platform, but it's massively underpowered. It's neat because it has a screen and a keyboard. I know the Hack 5 guys out there, another one of our sponsors, has done a lot of work with it as well. But it's kind of underpowered for my task, and when you're using the Svartkast, you're even using Tor I2P, and there's a lot of crypto happening, so you need a little bit more oomph if you're going to do any kind of crypto, or decent crypto. There's mini ITX boards, but one thing, this is a little expensive. But, these are small form factor, another possibility, but a little expensive for something you're going to leave behind and not necessarily be able to recover. The Beagle board, which is a development board for ARM, this is kind of nifty. However, once again, I think the price is, about 150 or so? Still a little pricey for what I want. Plug computers. Now, here we're getting into something. We're talking about the Shiva plug, the Pony Express kind of thing. I'm using a specific one called Poker Plug, which I'll be talking about in a second. There's been a lot of work in WRT54Gs. If that particular link, that's Larry Pesci, and as you can tell, he really loves his WRT54G. But him and I think Paul Asadorian wrote a book on hacking those and the possibility of leaving them behind and like hiding them up in like fixtures and so forth. So check that out. I'm not sure it's going to be quite as powerful as the modern plug computers, because I think it's running some kind of MIPS chip, if I'm not mistaken. But they have a whole book on the subject of hacking those you might want to check out, and that's a possibility as well. Then there's something I'm really interested in using, but it hasn't come out quite yet. Who else has been following the Raspberry Pi? Cool. I'm going to talk a lot more about that in a bit, but that's the platform I'm going to be moving to next. But why I chose the Pogo Plug? Well, first of all, it's a lovely color. That's what the Pogo Plug comes looking like when you get it. But I've seen the thing as cheap. Well, that's the core reason behind it. It's a box you may not be able to recover. So you want something that you don't mind throwing out or being lost. It only cost about $40. That's about as cheap as I found it. When it first came out, it cost a little bit more. But I don't know if they discontinued or what, but you can find them some places for, between $40 and $50. It's fairly small size. Now, this is the shell. I already took off the pink casing. I think the reason they made the pink one is because they sell a little more expensive version. It's gray, and I think they wanted to do that whole price discrimination thing where people go, I'm not secure enough in my masculinity to have the pink shell on my Pogo Plug, so I'll get the other unit. But, I decided I can take off everything else. With the shell on, it's fairly big, but this is actually the core components. This and a power cord, which I have right here. That's actually all it's actually to the Pogo Plug. It's got 3 USB 2 ports on the back, 1 in the front, and Ethernet. And I believe it also has a serial interface, but I never could actually get a proper connector for that, so I need to mess with that a little bit more. It takes 5 volts. Now this power supply, if you take it apart like I did, be careful not to put your fingers in the wrong place unless you want to get shocked. But since it runs on only 5 volts, we can probably modify that to get power from USB if we want to be a little bit more surreptitious. So at that point, it's just this board. So it's nice and tiny, and you can boot from a thumb drive, and it's incredibly hackable. But as far as specs are concerned, it's a Marvel Kirkwood 1.2 gigahertz processor, it's ARM 5 platform, it's got gigabit Ethernet, 4 USB ports, and 256 megs of RAM. All that for about $40. That's not too bad. By the way, the Raspberry Pi is going to beat it, which is why that's the next platform I'm going to be working with, but it's not available yet. If someone sees this and they can send me a developer board, beta board, I'd like to have one of those. But, that's what it is, taken apart next to a quarter. Without the hard candy shell. Now, when I'm talking about dropping a box in someone else's network, normally you'd have a straight connection. So you just go straight from the internet, straight into the box. Some people do node diagrams with this circles. This is my version of a node diagram. So the attacker would have the box inside of a network and just directly connect to it. However, if you're tracing that connection, you know who's connecting into the box. You can put a sniff on that, find out who it is. So you might want to be a little bit more surreptitious than that. So you can tunnel through a cipher space. In this case, I'm showing I2P, and I'll explain a little bit more about I2P in a second and why I like it. But how many people have ever heard of I2P? Okay, how many people have heard of Tor? Well, many similar concepts. I2P is more focused on an internal network. You're familiar with Tor hidden services where you can make a website and people can't directly figure out who's hosting the website? That is I2P's main focus. It can tunnel out into the public internet also, but it's really not its core focus, and it has like one out proxy it goes through. So it kind of has a different focus than Tor, and that's one of the big core differences. It also has in and out tunnels, so the way you send the message out and the way the message comes back to you is not necessarily the same way, and this massively confuses traffic correlation attacks, where people sit there and go, okay, so 2 megs go out that way, 2 megs this way, 2 megs out, 2 megs in. Now you know 2 megs out this way, 2 megs back in, some other way, different time delays. It causes interesting problems for people trying to follow everything. Though there hasn't been as much academic research as we would like, so if anybody wants to do some more academic research on I2P and possible attack vectors, they'd love to have it, and I also have a bunch of stickers for the project here with me. So a little more background. I'm using the term darknets all the time. Essentially, there's a few different definitions out there, but mine is, I'm working on, it's just anonymizing networks. They use encryption and proxies, so basically you encrypt something with multiple layers, you send it on to someone else, they strip off one layer using public key cryptography, that sends on to someone else, they strip off another layer, so that you have sort of forward secrecy of a sort, so the person it eventually comes out of doesn't know who originally sent it in, and the people in between don't know what the content is. So you have to have a whole lot of people collaborating to be able to break the anonymity of the system. At least that is the hope. It's also sometimes referred to as a cipher space, and I like this better because it has less name collision. Some people use the term darknet to refer to unallocated IP space that you put out there that you know is not used. So if you see someone touching these IPs you know aren't production IPs, it has to be bad traffic. And some people also use darknets for a cipher space that is only internal. For instance, if I set up a network that only me and Skydog and some can get into, it's to be a private .NET, and some people use .NET only for those type of private networks. I'm using it in a more broad sense. But cyberspace, like I said, because of lack of naming collision, and just because I like the term, it's probably a better word to use. I2P would be my cyberspace of choice for setting up my Svartkast or my Black Crow. But if you want any details on doing it with Tor, check out Telecom's website, which I'll be linking to later on. To tell you the truth, Tor is probably a better option at this point because we're talking about fairly reduced power hardware. And since Tor is written in C, as I recall, it's a little closer to the hardware, it's a lot faster. I2P is Java-based, which is not necessarily the best for super low-end platforms, but it's workable. I mentioned before, I2P is encrypted. You have multiple layers. For instance, let's say Alice wants to talk to Bob. You might send something out her out tunnel, and it's encrypted from her out to the next hop, the next hop, the next hop. It has end-to-end encryption, and each individual hop has its own encryption, and each tunnel has its own encryption. And so, hop, 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 hop. So I think we have 6 hops there before it gets out, and it's not necessarily coming back in the same way it goes out. She's sending it into someone, her out tunnel is sending it to someone else's in tunnel, and that person eventually is going out with their out tunnel to someone else's in tunnel. So like I said, there's a lot of people in that chain to cause confusion. But multiple levels of encryption and multiple proxies to obfuscate who's talking to who is the core concept. Alright, here's the boring part. If you want to go get a drink, go ahead and do it. I'm going to be talking about how you actually get Linux on one of these Pogo plugs, or how you put it this way, it already has Linux when you buy it, how you get a less restricted version of Linux on it. And all this work, the hard work's all been done with someone else. I'm basically just going through a tutorial on how you do it. And this video will be online as shortly as I can, so you have more detailed instructions. But I already have a text version of this article with some punctuation issues on my website. So if you want to do this, all the details are already on my website, and all the command lines you have to use and what files you have to grab. Roughly, we're going to use a lot of Jeff Duzen's work to do this. He's already has some scripts out on the URL you see there. I have my own notes at the link just below that. But the core steps are we got to partition the thumb drive we put into it. We got to download the install script, run the install script, add certain apps to make it more useful to us, get Java, install I2P because I2P is dependent on Java, and set up a connection in so we can remote into our little box. First of all, to set up SSH in, you got to figure out where the box is on your network. He's okay. He's one of the staff photographers. He's approving everything through us before he sends it out. Oh. But you got to figure out how to SSH into it. It's been so long since I had an unhacked one. In some versions of the Poker Plug, you can basically find a place that says turn on SSH, and then you can just log in with the username root and the password ceadmin. On yours that you get, you may have to go out and find instructions for turning on turning on SSH. Once you have SSH on, you can just SSH into the box. And the easiest way to figure out what IP you need to SSH into is just look at your router, configure it on your home network, look at your router, look at the MAC address, figure out its IP address, remote into that, and that's the very first step. You also want to insert a thumb drive that's been formatted or at least is non-bootable as of yet. Once you insert that, I just format it on Windows and plug it into the box, and it just sits there. Since it can't boot from it boots from the internal storage, and that gives me a chance to SSH in and get the scripts I need to install Debian. And think of a little bitty $40 box you can install Debian and anything from the Debian repositories in. That's a lot of stuff. And because we've got to partition that little thumb drive we insert, I got a 4 gig on here, and still got space on it, and it's going to have all the software I'm going to mention here in a few slides. So the first step, log in as root, use the password, and use fdisk to start partitioning it. I hit the M command to give me all my different options. M just lists all the different options you have for partitioning. And I don't remember all the different options for fdisk. Maybe someone out there does. So use M, it's like your help. So first step we got to do is we got to use O. I'm just clearing out everything, because sometimes I've used the thumb drive I've used before, and if you have partitions that are still there from the old install, might cause some confusion, so I just use O and wipe that out. Next up, I create a new partition, just a simple primary partition, and I make it of a decent size that's going to hold most of my content. You see I gave it 800 cylinders. I'm using a thumb drive, so it's not really 800 cylinders, but you can mess around with it and judge by space to figure out how big you need. So I figured I would take most of it for the thumb drive, most of the thumb drive for storing the actual operating system files, as opposed to swap space. Next, I'm going to create a new partition, and going to make my second partition. I'm going to create some swap space. You don't need a whole lot, and I'm only doing this because Jeff recommends it. I've heard various reports on using a thumb drive for swap space because there's only so many write cycles you have on a thumb drive. I'm not sure if it's a great idea, but since Jeff recommended it, and he's the one that wrote those scripts, I figured it'd be a good idea to recommend it as well. So far, my thumb drive hasn't failed, so I'm good to go. I haven't really put anything important on it, but the whole idea is the boxes you're going to throw away. So you're not going to put anything important on it. All right, hit P, and here's what my partition table looks like, and I write it out. So I have one partition that's my root partition with all my Linux OS on it, and then one little swap partition. At that point, I run this set of commands. And what I usually do is these commands, you can pretty much up to that red, that line in red, you can just copy and paste it into SSH, runs through them one at a time, and the first one, of course, change the directory to dit temp. It grabs Jeff's script, change mods it to make it executable, then sets up a path and actually runs it. Once you run it, you'll have to say OK to a few things, and it'll start installing. The new password, by the way, after it reboots, will be root. Root. So, before you deploy it anyplace else, make sure you change it. Oh, okay. And now, once we have all that installed, we have Debian on the box. It takes a little while to run because it has to download all the Debian packages. But pretty much, I'll go back there. At this point, you should have all you do is OK and at the confirm script, and it's going to download everything and put it on there. Now, if this path doesn't work, email me, because I got a report from someone else via email that some people are having problems with that path. But if you Google around various forums, you can find one that works. And when I tried this, I think about last time I built one was maybe about a month ago. It worked fine for me. I'm going to apt-get a few different tools. So we have Debian on here. Debian has a huge repository of software. So think of anything you'd want to have on a little bitty ARM box. You can pretty much get it. So apt-get install, and I'm getting all these different packages. And I'll explain why I'm getting these packages here on the next slide. I could get the default JRE, the Java Runtime Environment. I think this uses ICE-T as its core Java VM. The problem with it, it's a little slow for running I2P. I've yet to get it to actually work properly. So I don't grab it. I'm going to have to show you how to install the Oracle Sun version of Java for ARM 5 to make it run properly. LXDE is a Windows manager I'm using. You see I'm not explicitly grabbing Xserver. It's one of the dependencies of LXDE, so when I get that, it's going to get the Xserver for me. But it's a very lightweight desktop. This thing's not very powerful, so you want as lightweight a desktop as you can get. Iceweasel, for political reasons and copyright reasons, Iceweasel is Firefox for Debian. You can ask someone else for more details on why exactly that is. Someone else can explain it better than I can. Xfonts base, that should be a dependency of some of the other packages I'm installing, but it doesn't automatically grab it, so I have to grab it to make sure some of the other software packages work. XRDP, you can actually remote desktop into your little Pogo plug and get a GUI with XRDP. The reason I install XRDP sometimes is I don't always have a VNC client on all my boxes, but I almost always have a remote desktop client on all my boxes. For that matter, you can also use VNC. Just grab tight VNC and use it. I use Nano as my text editor, so I usually grab Nano because I'm lame, and I get, VI, what key sequence is this to actually edit and save it? Screw it, it was Nano. So I go grab Nano, and then I'm good to go. Also, because these scripts, at least last time I checked, didn't quite work right for setting up a daemon to automatically run the I2P as a service, I use cron to make sure it's always running, so I grab cron as well. Alright, after I have all those installed, now it's pretty much as simple as running the command, and how many people have used Debian before? Debian's nifty, and it's just apt-get that stuff, and it sucks it down, and you're good to go. And by the way, as far as making something like kind of similar to a Pwn plug or a Pony Express, at this point you can just start apt-getting various security tools. It may be as full-fledged. And by the way, another thing I want to try, actually, never mind, I'll save this for another slide. I got it in a later slide. I have some plans to try to get backtrack on something like this. Something like it. I'll get into the details in a bit. But like I mentioned before, the Java runtime environment that comes with Debian, it's not the default free JRE, is not fast enough. So what we have to do is get the Oracle version. So we go out there and download it. At the time I wrote this, I could just wget that particular string. At this point, you probably want to go out and check this URL and see what the newest ARM 5 one out there is. ARM 5 headless. It'll be a similar name to this. Once I get it, I just have to untar it and set the path to it because the binaries are always set to work. I edit my profile and I go ahead and just add .jre to my path. If you're wondering how you do that exactly, you basically look around in that profile file, use Nano or VI, and edit it as such. Really, like I said, this is the part of the talk that's really boring because it's me telling you, you do this step, now you do this step, now you do this step. I have a text document out there that explains it all, and to my knowledge, it should get you in the right, it should set you on the path to actually getting one of these things completed. Alright, after it's actually installed, run Java version to make sure that you're not running the wrong version. It'll clear up all sorts of problems. And it should say something like Java SE for embedded 7 and explicitly state the information you see up there. Or something very similar, maybe a bit different build number. Just make sure it doesn't say ICE-T. Unless it's a couple years from now, in which case ICE-T may work fine with I2P at that point. And it may work fine. Actually, I think it does work fine if you're using an x86 box. If you're running on like a normal system, it will work with I2P. It's just for whatever reason, on this little ARM platform, it doesn't work. Last I tried. Alright, now we have to grab I2P. You can go out to i2p2.de and download the install package. They used to have a simple URL, and I think they still have get I2P. I think they used to have like i2p.org, but the core developer had to disappear for a year. They're not sure, and they've never heard from him since. So there's some mystery what happened to Jay Random. Jay Random's the guy that started the project off. Currently, ZZZ is the guy in charge of it. I got to meet him at DEF CON this year. Cool guy. But there's a mystery about what happened to the guy who originally started the whole ITP project. I think it's kind of nifty and possibly sad depending on what happened to the man. But you grab it, and you're double getting an EXE. Yes, you're double getting an EXE for an ARM-based Linux box. Trust me, it works. Once you have that EXE, you basically have to run it as a jar file, so java-jar, the name of the EXE, /console since you don't have a GUI. Well, you can use a GUI if you really want to, but it's easier to SSH in and use -console, so everything you have to confirm would be text-based. Just yes, yes, next, next. Except I changed a couple defaults. I point it to put I2P in my own directory on the I2P bin. Ideally, I should modify my instructions. I'm currently running this all as root, and inside root's profile. Probably not the best thing from a security standpoint. However, this is also a box I'm, intending to leave behind and throw away, so it's not necessarily a crucial thing. But I figured I should point that out. So I'm putting all my binaries in I2P bin. Once I do that, I have to actually run I2P, so I2P bin, I2P router start. That will run, and that will generate a temporary folder for me as well. That probably is not going to work, though. That'll work, actually, if you're on a Windows box. If you're on an x86 box. It doesn't quite work right on these ARM boxes I've tried. So, try using I2P bin /runplain.sh. That should work, and that will generate these temp files. See, it kind of confused me the first time when I started using I2P. I figured inside with the binaries would be all the config files. It's not. It actually puts them in .I2P. For those who aren't familiar with Linux, if you have a dot in front, it means it's supposed to be like a hidden file, so it doesn't come up when you do an ls. But all your actual configuration files would be in there after the first time you run I2P. Now, I have to make a few different changes to I2P for my purposes. What I do is I make an extra copy of runplain.sh so I can make a few changes to it to the path. This is so when I try to fire it up from a cron job, it actually functions. And I add into the path where my special Java runtime environment is, export the path out, then I edit my cron tab, and I make it so, I think this is every minute it tries to run, did I get that right? Every hour, thank you. Every hour it tries to, who said it? Okay, thank you. Every hour it tries to run I2P, and if it's already up and running, it just says, okay, I'll shut down. But that way it's always up and running. And it also automatically starts on every reboot. I go in and make a few tweaks, because I want to be able to remote into this box. By default, you can only connect to I2P from the local host and then get out onto the I2P network. That's a bit of a pain for configuring this box, so I change it to where anything on the network can connect in. I also take out the IP6 part of that, since I'm not using IP6 in this box. If you're going to do this, and you want to set it to where you can get to configure everything from the console, you probably also want to set a password. And I don't think I put that instructions in here in the slide properly, but it is in my text documents out on my website. Another tweak you'll want to do is set up to where you can tunnel traffic through it, not just from local hosts, but from any host in your network. And that's as easy as going into the console and setting access point reachable drop down to 0000 to accept any connection from any place. You can also probably edit your .I2P/I2P-tunnel.config to do it. Another tweak you might want to do is, since we have such low power, the way I2P works is everybody's sharing their bandwidth. Now, you're not an out proxy, so if you're worried about someone accessing something you wouldn't want them to access through your box, you don't have to worry about it, because everything coming from you is encrypted, and you have an idea what IP it's being sent to and who it's coming from, but you don't know if those are the originators. And it's all encrypted while it goes through you, so sharing your bandwidth in that way isn't a liability. It's just a sharing of bandwidth. However, on these low-end platforms, if you have a modern PC, it's no big deal, computation-wise. But if you're on one of these low-end platforms, doing all the extra computation for everybody else might be a bit much. So you can actually say, okay, I don't want to participate in other people's tunnels. From the staying anonymous standpoint, it's actually better to participate in other people's tunnels, because the more traffic that's coming through you from other people that's unrelated to you, the more confusing it's going to be to an adversary. But for the sake of having these low-powered platforms, you can turn that off. Also, if you ever have a problem with I2P or you want to reread the configuration files, you can use this command kill and cat out that intent file router.I2P. That stores the PID number for your I2P process. By the way, those are tick marks. Essentially, that gets translated into the number automatically. Then you can just start it again. Although here I used the wrong instructions. I'm using the instructions for a PC. You'll want to use the that run plain I mentioned before to get it up and functioning again. Okay, now we have a few options for remoting in. You could set up something like RDP or VNC so you can remote into the box and share out that port via I2P. But that's going to be awfully slow. I mean, in and of itself, it's a little bit slow using a GUI on one of these little low-powered ARM boxes. But if you tried tunneling something like a remote desktop or an X session over Tor, yeah, that's not going to be, was it usable? Didn't think so. So we got to do something a little different. We can set up some kind of VPN and forward that. That's a possibility. I haven't tried it, but that's a possibility. There's also Garlic Cat. Garlic Cat is like a VPN service you can install in a box that deliberately routes through I2P, which is nifty, but it looked a little heavier to install. There's also something called Onion Cat, which is the same thing but for Tor. You can also just set up SSH. Since with SSH you can do dynamic port forwarding, so you have a proxy port where if it's an application that understands socks, you can just forward all your traffic through the Pogo plug that way. That's the option I went with just because it's the simplest. It's got some of its own issues from an anonymity standpoint, but it's what I ended up going with. Now, to actually set this up, you have to go into your Pogo plug, and you already have SSH running because that's how you got in and installed things in the first place. And you have to go in and set yourself up a new server tunnel, and on that server tunnel, you point it to point to localhost port 22. And so I2P, whenever it sees a connection coming in, it'll automatically send it to localhost port 22, and now you SSH into your box over I2P. You'll also notice, and it's way too small to see here, but there's this connection string that you'll have to use in the next step, because this is the configuration on the server side, on the Pogo plug. On your PC to remote into it, it's a little bit different. You're going to have this, and you're going to have a base 64 address after you start up your things on the server side. On the client side, on your PC, you'll have to set up another tunnel, and on it, you would say, on my local host, create a new port 22, and tunnel everything from here to this particular destination inside the I2P network. I2P is a bit complex to explain all in this talk, but I have a talk from a fireside, a talk from ShmooCon Firesides this year that you can check out with more details on installing I2P. But basically the idea is you have these base 32 addresses that you can send stuff to, and it tunnels through the I2P network automatically for you. But you use those instead of IPs directly. But on the other end, you have IPs listening. So it's kind of like, if you're familiar with how port forwarding works with Netcat or SSH, vaguely similar concept. Okay, that's the basis of it. Now I can actually SSH into that Pogo plug on someone else's network, get in, forward stuff that accepts connecting to a SOCKS proxy, and I'm good to go. However, if you want speed, you probably just want to go with the direct connection method. So if nothing else, if you don't use any of the darknet section I covered there, at least you have a $40 Debian box. And that's pretty nifty in and of itself. Now for future work on this, I really want to switch to the Raspberry Pi platform. And I think it's supposed to be out sometime in like, what, November? I think that's what I've been hearing. So maybe it'd be November, maybe December. But when one of these comes out, I'm definitely ordering one. Because it's got pretty good specs. Now it runs at 700 megahertz instead of 1.2. But keep in mind, especially on ARM, megahertz doesn't mean anything. I mean, people were complaining about Evo Shift coming out saying, hey, it's slower than the old Evo. Well, its clock speed is less, but all the benchmarks put it a lot faster. So it's probably still going to be faster, and I've actually seen a version of it playing Quake 3 using an extra, I guess it's got some kind of graphical chipset on it as well. So that's pretty nifty. I'm pretty damn sure that's way more powerful than the Pogo plug. 256 megs of RAM, supports OpenGL, you put out a 1080p signal, it's got a little HDMI port for that, USB 2 support, also has composite video out. You can boot from a little SD card. Has general purpose I/O, so you want to hook it to some other microcontroller type projects. That's a possibility. 2 USB ports, but you can hook it to a hub to get more. Has built-in 10100 Ethernet, and you can use open source software on it like Ubuntu. So once again, we get a Debian-based distro on it, so we can get the stuff we want, which is what's killer to me. And once again, probably should be a way more powerful platform, because check out the demo video of it running Quake 3, but it's pretty impressive. Also, it's only going to cost, for this particular version, $35. That is what they reported. Now, the lesser version that doesn't have the Ethernet built in is going to be, I think, $25. But that is what they're reporting. And it's going to be about, according to what they're saying, about credit card size. The alpha boards they have out there are a little bit bigger than that. But supposedly we'll get hardware November, December timeframe, sometime fourth quarter of this year. So expect to get it early next year. Check out the website sometime, though. It's they've been doing some pretty impressive stuff on it. More ideas I have for these little micro ARM boxes. Set one up as an Ethernet tap. Essentially, you already have one Ethernet jack built in. You get a USB Ethernet dongle. I have one. It does recognize it in Debian on this. Actually, it also recognizes most any wireless USB adapter I put in it, so I can connect it to a wireless network that way. But what I tried to do was set up bridging and have it be basically an Ethernet logger for me. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's because it's too slow or what, but whenever I tried that, it didn't work on here using the same commands that would work on an x86 box. So I haven't got that functioning yet. Maybe when the Raspberry Pi comes out, I'll be able to do that. But the idea is I could sit this in on someone's Ethernet cable. It would act like a 2-port switch, but log every single packet to an SD card for me. Or a thumb drive, which I think would be nifty. Bluetooth device logger. If you want to know who all's phones have been passing through and assuming they leave Discovery on, hook a little Bluetooth dongle to it and just have it sit there all day long at a mall or whatever, logging Bluetooth IDs. I think that'd be a nifty project. Hold on a second, sorry. Slide fail. Alright, go that way. USB powered, as I mentioned before, it's 5 volts. So assuming you can get enough amperage out there, assuming it's like, low enough, we should hopefully be able to, if it's less than half an amp, we should be able to get it USB powered. Power over Ethernet is also a very strong possibility. Getting Backtrack to run on is nifty. You all seen Backtrack's ARM port? Essentially, you have a change root environment where change root into it, and you have a bunch of ARM binaries for Backtrack. Now, I don't think this is ever going to work on the Pogo plug. I don't think it's powerful enough. But a little Raspberry Pi, now we're talking about something. I mean, I think Dave on his Zoom, he has Backtrack on it. I've gotten Backtrack to function before on my Evo Shift. It wasn't incredibly useful, but on this device, it might very well be. And this might have enough oomph to do that. But I'll have to wait till I actually get the hardware to give it a shot. Also, the idea of setting up a mesh network. For a mesh network to work right, to work the way we want it to work, we would need very cheap hardware. This range, this $40 range, or $35 in the case of the Raspberry Pi, that's getting into the right ballpark for us. But if you're not familiar with how a mesh network works, essentially you have a bunch of boxes, and you have like an ad hoc network where one goes, okay, I'm in the range of these other nodes, I'll relay messages for you, you relay messages for me, and the idea is to kind of make, I guess, a layer 2, or well, to a degree, layer 2, layer 1 darknet. The problem with a lot of darknets like Tor and ITP is someone cuts off the entire internet, you're out of luck. You ain't getting anywhere. So the idea is that people make their own infrastructure. And actually, there's various government projects out there, like Internet in a Suitcase, to help political dissidents in other countries be able to get out and communicate. But the hardware for that's probably a little bit more expensive. But imagine if you could just, drop ship a bunch of, maybe $50 boxes off and say, put these every 2 miles, and you'll have a mesh network to get out. Also, there's the possibility of doing store and forward, where essentially you have nodes that want to get a message out, but they're not always within range of another node. They could store it wait till they're in range, and forward it on. Now, we're not talking about low latency traffic like web traffic, but if the point is just communications, just to get a message out, that's just fine for things like emails or even something like Twitter posts, just to say, this is what's happening in this region of this particular country. A little bit more info about mesh networks if you're interested in researching this, and this is something I think is fascinating, but I don't feel like I know enough about it. So there needs to be a clear forerunner to set one up. I mean, there's different standards out there, but I don't think anything's really taken off. Check out the Wikipedia entry, of course, on mesh networks if you want to know more about the concept. There's also the Village Infrastructure in a Kit Alpha project, which is out there in that following URL. If you want to read about the U.S. government's doing to help political dissidents, New York Times has an article out there on their whole Internet in a Suitcase project, and the title of the article is U.S. Underwrites Internet Detour Around Censors. So it's out there to solve that problem of, this government decides to repress its citizens by killing the Internet connection. We'll make our new Internet connection. Finally, a few links. Like I said, a lot of the middle slides in this were incredibly boring because it's type in this command, type in this command, type in this command. So I have a text version of this article. If you just want to copy and paste the commands, it's out there. And with just a little bit of Linux knowledge, you're just fine. Man, what kind of asshole doesn't turn off his phone when someone's talking? Hold on a second. Hello, roommate. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead and shut it down. Go ahead and just put it in the box there. We'll figure out what to do in a bit. What do you think about people who answer their phone while they're in a talk? What do you think about, like, people who are listening to a talk who answer their phone when they're in a talk? Okay. What do you think about speakers who do it? I'm just curious, but thanks for letting me. All right. Bye. That's okay. That's okay, Glenn. Glenn, I want to say thank you for being on my video crew. Everybody say thank you, Glenn, for being on my video crew. Thank you, Glenn. I'll talk to you later, bud. Bye-bye. Also, big thanks to Sabrina, Skydog, we got Jennifer, we got Reed, and I think Dave's still over in the other room. And did I miss anybody? Thanks, guys. Give them a round of hand. All right. Another link you would check out, Telecomics and their Svartkast project, because they do much the same thing with Tor instead. Tor is probably a better call because it's C-based and it's going to be running better on this low-end platform. I just want to see if I can do it with ITP for the fun of it. But they have a lot of other stuff about, freedom of routing around censorship that's probably worth checking out. So definitely go check out them, and they've been a great resource while I was researching for this presentation. A few other links. If you want to read a whole lot on anonymity networks, Freehaven has a great archive of stuff. If you want to see about ITP and threat models for actually trying to de-anonymize people inside these networks, the threat model is an awesome resource. I have a general darknets talk out there that I gave at AID earlier this year. I also have a de-anonymizing ITP talk, which Tenacity was kind enough to sponsor, sending me to DC Black Hat for that. And I have both a paper and a video of that. If you want more information on dynamic port forwarding, so you can send any old thing via SSH through I2P, I have a video out there on that as well. Yes, these slides will all be up on my website relatively shortly. Thanks again to the conference organizers for having me. Being accepted for a talk at a DerbyCon is a little bit like your mom calling you handsome. For me, it just doesn't mean a whole lot, I guess. But I'm glad that I'm talking up here. I'm glad y'all came to talk, listen to my talk. Of course, also my buddies on the ISD podcast crew, and Open Icon Library, who I bogarted a lot of the images from. A few events. Now, of course, the first event I think you all already know about, so I can probably skip that one. Louisville InfoSec, which actually happened just the other day, but will be coming up again next year. It might be a back-to-back with DerbyCon again, so if you want to come to both, please come to both. Have a lot of fun. Of course, HackerCon, which is coming up here a little bit later this month. SkydogCon, which is coming up early next month. Happening at the same time as Freaknik. Not going to go into the details of that, but I'm going to be giving a talk at both. Well, we one day different. But actually, it was a similar thing because we couldn't get a time spot. You have to take when you can get the conference space, and that's one of the reasons it was so close. Understood, man. Not a cons no one I go to, and of course, AutoZone down in Atlanta. AutoZone and Skydog Con are both ran by Skydog, who's once again on my video crew. Thanks, guys. And I think I have about 5 minutes, so if anybody has any questions, I'm up here and ask away. Yes, sir. Woo. What I've been doing is I've just been going out to Google's product search and looking there, and I was able to find one. When I bought mine, I bought it for $50, and that was because someone, I want to say, was it the 404 list, emailed out, and it's like, Pogo Plug is $50 in this place, so I bought me one. I think a few weeks ago I looked out on Google's product search, and I found one for like $40. Maybe they've already sold out. See, that's one of the reasons I want to switch to the Raspberry Pi, because I'm under the impression from looking at the Pogo Plug website, they've kind of gotten out of the hardware business and going for purely software, cloud-based, cloud-based plug services. So it may no longer be produced, so maybe the reason I got so cheap is they're trying to sell out last ones. But when the Raspberry Pi comes out, a lot of the stuff I've done with this, I'll be able to do with the Raspberry Pi, and probably better because it's going to be a little bit more powerful platform. But Google product search, give it another shot, but maybe they've sold out every place that I could get them cheap. Any more questions? Let's hope not. Yes. In theory, as long as it can read, like, I think I have it set up as extended 2, but yes. Squash Smith? That was what you thought? Okay. Okay. To tell you the truth, a lot of this, I was following Jeff's instructions, saying, this. But yes, more than likely you could. You actually probably could. You might have to worry somewhat about if you do the entire install, the keys that are automatically generated for I2P, you wouldn't want your keys to be the same as their keys. But besides that, yeah, probably. Yes. I have. Oh, I'm trying to recall what the Kismet. You know, I may have tried that, but I don't remember what the outcome was. But in theory, it could because it accepts the wireless. You know, it accepts the wireless USB adapters I put into it. So I'm pretty sure you probably could get Kismet. So it might be a good thing for like a Kismet node network. But I have to try again. I vaguely recall giving it a shot, but I don't remember what the outcome was. Well, that's another reason why, and on Telecomic's website, they mentioned if you're going to do this on a laptop or leave it behind, make sure there's nothing on the hardware that physically identifies you. Otherwise, I mean, if you get this, you don't have my fingerprints, of course. But if someone was being very clean room about it, you wouldn't have that. And what's on the thumb drive, as long as you use the thumb drive you never put any confidential information on. But once again, if you're using it for anonymity, you won't be sending anything across that SSH tunnel that you're really worried about. So you're not going to be like these people at these embassies that are using Tor to connect a POP3 unencrypted email. Yes? Well, yes. If you log into your own email account over Tor, then that's identifiable. Sometimes if you use IRC and you don't make the right settings in your IRC client, it might use your local account name as your ident information. I mean, a lot of protocols are really hard to secure. There's a talk I did for DEF CON this year. I have it up on my website. Take a look at it. But yeah, there's a lot of things application level that will, you'll screw the pooch and give away your identity. Well, that's where the mesh network thing would come in. But you couldn't send it all over the encrypted Wi-Fi. I mean, you send it to encrypted Wi-Fi, but then you have a landline connection thereafter, where it's not encrypted. Or you mean basically instead of remoting into it over the internet, remoting into it via Wi-Fi, directional? Well, yeah, if you can get a line of sight and do that, I don't see why you couldn't. I don't know if anybody who's set that up directly, but I have not. But I also don't own any, so yes. Well, good auditing of what is actually out on your network, having scans constantly running what's out there. I have some videos out there for detecting things in promiscuous mode. So if someone's using this as a box to sniff your network, you might be able to spot it that way. Though really, network inventory systems I'm not as familiar with as I would like to be, so I can't really recommend a package to look. I mean, one place I used to work, we had something set up where we'd automatically scan the entire network with Nmap and we report back. But if someone doesn't have any ports listening on this, besides local hosts, which could still be contactable via I2P, you wouldn't find it that way necessarily. This one is, yes, it wouldn't have to be, but this one, yes, it is. On this, yeah, there's nothing, no. And, interesting about DHCP, I've actually found people using Backtrack on a network because Backtrack by default host name is BT, so you'll look in your DHCP information logs and you'll see, oh, someone with host name BT connected to my network. I'll go visit that guy. What's he doing? Yes. I haven't heard that. Once I've done this, it hasn't been pushed down because I had this up and running for a long time. But that probably is a good point. So as soon as you get the Pogo plug, don't let it do an update. Do your Debian install first. Yeah, so much like when you get a new iPhone or an iPad, hack it now and don't update first. Yeah. Oh, the guy behind you has a question, though. Space reasons, and to tell you the truth, I was basically being the install equivalent of a script kiddie by copying a lot of Jeff's works. I was interested in getting Debian on it, and from that point, I spent most of my research time trying to get I2P on it thereafter. So I was basically following Jeff's instructions at that point. But I imagine the reason is there's only so much storage on this, and so to get all the tools I'd want, I pretty much have to use external thumb drive storage. Any more questions? Well, thank you very much for attending my talk, and y'all have a great day.